Welcome to the She Births Show podcast, Season 2. I'm Nadine Richardson, mother, yoga teacher, doula, author and speaker, founder of the world's only scientifically verified childbirth education program, She Births, and host of your She Births Show. We created the She Births Show on audio and YouTube as a place to inspire your birth, evolve your parenting, and help you live a life that you love. Through the She Births course and community support, we are proud to have supported thousands of families with the education to facilitate a better birthing experience as well as better breastfeeding, including initiation and continuation. You can log into our free app and learn more from our videos and resources. Hi and welcome to episode 4, season 2 of the She Births Show. I'm so glad you're here and able to tune into my very candid conversation with the wonderful postnatal doula and trainer, Julia Jones. Julia is leading a worldwide renaissance in the way we care for newborn mothers. She's passionate about creating a village and changing the conversation about motherhood, just like we are at She Births. We both share a love of ayurveda and chat today about the really practical things you can do in the first 24 hours, 4 days, and 40 days after birth to nourish yourself or care for a mum. We also talk about what is happening inside the brain throughout pregnancy and postpartum. We discuss the spirituality and philosophy that's important to connect with through such a big transformative time in our lives. Julia is author of 2 fantastic books I highly recommend: Nourishing Newborn Mothers, Ayurvedic Recipes to Heal Your Mind, Body and Soul After Childbirth. And they're actually yummy any time of the day or night, a lot of those recipes. And also Newborn Mothers. When a baby is born, so is a mother. You can discover more about Julia Jones, her training, her books, and educational resources at the Newborn Mothers Collective. URL is www.newbornmothers.com. Enjoy. So today's podcast is a little bit different. We have Nadine from She Births and me, Julia, from Newborn Mothers, and we wanted to sort of collaborate and interview each other and sort of just have a conversation together about our work. Now,
hello, I say hi as well. It feels so weird. It's like a double.
I know, we don't really know who's hosting.
We don't know. We just thought we'd jump in.
But I do want to give you a little bit of a plug because you have the world's only scientifically verified childbirth education program, which is how I first came across you, because you've got lots of media and news about the evidence-based research behind your childbirth education. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that, what it is that you actually do and how you and how it works?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having me on your podcast. Thanks for being on our podcast too.
Yes, and thank you for having me on your podcast.
Before I launch in, I suppose we'll let our listeners know on the She Birth Show as well that we're so excited to have you with us talking about the Ayurvedic approach to postpartum care and leading the sort of training in postpartum doulas around the world with you and your great work. So it's great to have you as well. I started She Births, I suppose the seed of the idea probably started when I had my own child over nearly 18 years ago now. And I wondered, what the heck is going on with birth education? Why did nothing prepare me for my labour experience? And I started to wonder about birth and why it was so different for so many people. And the pain was experienced in different ways. Complications happened, even though people had prepared the same way. And physiology and anatomy didn't appear to be so different among certain women, and yet the disparity of experiences was so broad. And every time I tried to talk about birth and what was going on, no one seemed to know the answers, or there was just a whole bunch of like myths and taboos. And so I just started exploring and researching and training and became a doula like yourself as soon as I could, and realised there was nothing great enough out there for people preparing for childbirth, I felt, and I wanted to create a really comprehensive, holistic preparation that allowed people to feel really confident before birth, really bonded before birth, but also go through birth in an enriching and empowering way and come out the other side believing and knowing that they were friggin' awesome, because that's how you want to come out, right? No matter how birth unfolds, you want to know inside yourselves that you've given it everything and you've had the best support and the best preparation. And that's what good education and good support can give you. So, I created She Births. We launched nearly 11 years ago now, and then the research was done with Western Sydney University and the National Institute of Complementary Medicines. And that took ages, years and years, and it was run as a randomised trial. People were literally recruited from the deliveries, the antenatal ward as they were waiting for their appointments. The researcher would walk around with an iPad and say, would you like to be involved in this trial? You know, are you a first-time mum? You know, are you low risk? And they'd just be designated, if they said yes, into either the control group, which was receiving standard hospital birth education, and then the intervention group was the She Births program for 2 days. So it was a 2-day intervention, just like the course has always been. I wish it was 5 days, but you know, there's no bloke in the world that's going to want to sit in a birth education program for more than 2 days. So my partner's like, you can't make it any longer than that. And so, the trial results came back and they were so good that they had to go back and do the stats again because people thought that they'd got it wrong, or the people at the uni.
Yeah, wow. So the outcomes were that different.
Yeah, they couldn't believe it, and no one was expecting it. You know, this is women's healthcare, this is maternity, this is birth education. Nothing really significant happens in this space. We know from Cochrane reviews that birth education is a lovely thing to contribute to lowering anxiety, and maybe it allows women to come into the hospital further dilated in active labour rather than pre-labour. But often it actually increases epidural rates.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the education is hospital based, and all they do is show you the pain management techniques that they have.
Well, they might not even show you pain management techniques, but why do they call it pain management?
No, that's right. But they will tell you can have. Yeah. They'll tell you can have gas or you can have an epidural. Those are your options.
Yeah, and look, there's such a variety of different hospital courses as well. There are some that are really great, but it is true that unfortunately the majority aren't great, and women come out often feeling more afraid and certainly lacking in confidence in themselves and in their partners, and not being given practical tools for birth. And, you know, what I realised, it's not just about the tools as well, it's about the philosophy. It's about the attitude that you hold inside yourself, and that requires an educational system and transformation for us to align with. So, basically the stats came back. They were published in the British Medical Journal in July 2016, and we had a 44% reduction in caesarean sections, and we had, which is 44 is my favourite number, by the way, always has been, so I was pretty happy with that, and a 65% reduction in epidural usage. And then we had a 50% reduction in the use of synthetic oxytocin to augment labour, and a 53% reduction in the resuscitation of babies after birth.
Wow, that is amazing. That's so amazing. I mean, even I think a lot of doctors and things wouldn't actually believe that childbirth education could improve the health outcomes of a baby. I mean, that's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, now Dr. Andrew Bissetts, or Professor Andrew Bissetts, is actually one of our board advisors now, and I went straight to him and I showed him the data, and he was in tears and I was in tears, and we were just so happy. And he just said, like, to see that reduction in resuscitation of babies is just so fascinating and so important and so profound, as we know. And he even said about the 12% reduction in perineal trauma, which doesn't sound like a huge amount. He just said, I've spent, 40 years going to conferences around the world getting excited about a 2% reduction in perineal trauma. So education really does make a difference. Preparation can empower you and create a really high degree of maternal satisfaction. And that's what we're always tracking in our own research as well, that we've continued on online, and we've done a private hospital trial, and we've done lots of great things, and we want to continue doing more research as well. It's very important.
Yeah, it's very inspiring to me that you've done all of that research. I think it really makes a big difference, not just for you and your course, but for the whole industry and the culture of birth, really, doesn't it? It has a big impact.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it's a really important thing. And, some people say, the trial was only a small 176 births, but actually, some trials that are included even in Cochrane or RCTs that are run sometimes 25 to 30 births, some of them.
Yeah.
Valid. So it was a gold standard. There was qualitative and quantitative data collected, and it was a true controlled trial. They even weren't able, without quite a lot of hunting in the She Births book, which was not called a She Births book, they could see a reference to She Births in their booklet that they were given, but they weren't even, encouraged to look online, to go beyond those 2 days and a very small booklet that they were given. So it just shows you that it makes a difference.
And so far you've been teaching most of this yourself in real life?
We have, that was actually, that trial wasn't conducted by me. I was mentoring the educator.
Yeah.
Felt that was even more valid.
Yeah, I agree. That's great. Yeah. And now you're moving into online work too. So it's not just people in Sydney and the east coast of Australia, but now people all over the world can access this.
Yeah, we do. We've got educators in Victoria and around New South Wales. And then we have the online program that you can do via the app, so in your phone, via an iPad, and a really fantastic learning management system, that people just share into their Apple TV, and they can jump on the floor and start doing, yoga and acupressure for pre-labour and, breathing techniques and all that kind of stuff, just to make it accessible for everyone is what our vision is.
Yeah, I love it. And of course, the question and the angle that I'm always coming with is how do you, with that education, prepare people for postpartum and motherhood as well?
Yeah, and that leads into, I think you and I share a huge, we have an alignment in our values and in our philosophy. She Births is actually a Vedic program, is a yoga-based program. That's my background, and I started using yoga to heal myself from the age of 16 of severe anxiety disorder and then clinical depression. And I became a yoga teacher long before it was trendy, 24 years ago, to share that with the world. So She Births is a Vedic program, but you don't certainly have to be a yogi to do it. And I know that you're Ayurvedic in your approach as well. So we give quite a strong emphasis on slowing down during pregnancy, learning the art of self-care as a sort of teaching for motherhood during your pregnancy, and learning that art of interdependence and receiving care during birth as well, which is another teaching for motherhood. And then very important is that we give ourselves, if we can, the 40-day rest period, because that sets us up for the next 40 years. Yeah, a lot of the principles and the intimacy that's developed during the She Births program really are foundations for how we parent or how we work as a family unit. And so we facilitate a lot of interesting conversations throughout the program. And I know that people email me and their kids are like 7, 8 now, and they like still doing those visualizations on the tube to work in London. So She Births gave me life skills and an attitude that has stayed with me till today, and I'm still using it all the time. So about the wisdom of nature and our innate wisdom and intelligence, I believe. It's just a nature-based philosophy and spirituality, isn't it? The Vedic approach.
Yes, exactly. And we've talked about this a little bit before too, but about the spirituality of becoming a mother, because I know that's a really big part of what you do, which I love as well, because that's what we have in common too, that you have both a sort of scientific grounding and the Ayurvedic influence, and also this kind of spiritual, more, you know, intuitive, feminine approach. So I think it's really magic when you can combine those different sort of elements.
That's right. So tell me, how do you come to be a postpartum doula? I just don't think, firstly, there is enough postpartum doulas. I don't think people understand what a postpartum doula really is and how important they are. Tell me all about how you became...
Yeah, well, you know, my journey was actually before I even had children. I wanted to study Ayurveda, and I realised that I wasn't going to be able to do, like, you know, 6 years in a university in Kerala. So I was like, well, I'd rather specialise. I'd rather, you know, be really good at one area. And that's how I came across postpartum Ayurvedic care. And I just thought, wow, this is amazing. And I kind of, before that, I had a background in sort of community development, social justice. I was always, you know, sort of interested in human rights and feminism and that kind of thing. And I always saw that when women had babies, that this was, that in our culture, it just wasn't right. You know, people were so isolated and so alone. We had no support and no stories. And, you know, so that was kind of how I came into it, also through my Ayurvedic background. And then it's obviously grown a lot from there. But I think what a lot of people don't realise is that traditionally, when people, you know, would give birth in traditional cultures, they didn't necessarily need a lot of help with giving birth. You know, it's more the idea of the knitting midwife, that if people are prepared with the right sort of stories, you know, and a lot of our culture of birth is about avoiding unnecessary interventions, you know. So if that didn't exist, then women just can tune into their bodies and, you know, like really trust that innate power and give birth quite naturally and easily, you know, in a long time ago, before we have this kind of industrial culture of birth that we have now. And when we were still more in touch, I think, with our feminine wisdom and feminine power, you know, when those kinds of lineages were still there. But what people don't realise is that originally the word doula was actually postpartum support. It was a word that was coined by Dana Raphael, who was an anthropologist who passed away just recently, but she really devoted her whole life to understanding postpartum care off the back of her own very difficult breastfeeding journey.
Really?
And she asked the question, why is it so hard for women in our culture to breastfeed when the entire human race has done this for, you know, millions of years in hundreds of different cultures, well, thousands of years in hundreds of different cultures? You know, why isn't it working in our culture? So as an anthropologist, that was obviously her approach, was what is missing in our culture that makes it so hard to breastfeed. So the word doula was originally for postpartum, and then it got changed because Donor at the time, who were the sort of the main doula organisation, they were really concerned that doulas were going to separate, postpartum doulas were going to separate mothers and babies. They thought it was going to be something like a night nurse, you know, where we actually, it becomes an intervention. It becomes something that comes in between the mother and baby and interferes with that bond and interferes with breastfeeding and that kind of thing, which was never the intention. And actually, Dana Raphael found that postpartum doula support, the specific role, exists in 178 different cultures.
Wow.
Around the world. So, you know, when I found all this out, I was like, no wonder it's not working in our culture. You know, this is what we're missing.
And what did Dana come up with when she was exploring that as an anthropologist? It's such an interesting perspective to look at what is missing.
Yeah, so, well, the way that she phrased it, which I loved, and I wish I had the exact quote in front of me, but she sort of basically described that it's rare to have a biological function of the body, like breastfeeding, that requires social support. But what she found is that when someone was alone they couldn't breastfeed. That was basically it, that they needed to have someone there who was loving, listening, you know, nurturing, feeding them, caring for them, and that without that other person standing there, this biological function didn't happen, which was such a really mind-blowing revelation.
Wow. I mean, what does that come down to? I mean, that just leads into so much around your work and the training that you provide for other women to give that work. So does that mean that we just need more oxytocin in the room, or?
Yeah, well, that's right. If you want to look at it from a scientific point of view, oxytocin is obviously the letdown reflex, the hormone that makes your milk actually come down. So even if you have milk in your breasts, but most women who breastfeed will have experienced this. If you're in public and you feel like someone's staring at you, or you don't feel safe, or, you know, someone is judging you, then even though your breast is full of milk, it won't actually come out, and, you know, your baby might be fussy because they're sucking and the milk won't let down. You know, so again, the support that we require is the support that's increasing that oxytocin, which is actually involves needing some privacy as well. So, you know, it can't just be like having thousands of visitors drinking tea and leaving a mess. It has to be, you know, someone you trust, someone who cares about you, someone who's not, you know, interfering or giving advice or passing judgment, but just someone who is really just there to listen and care for you and hold your hand and say you're doing awesome. You know, and in the same way that when you prepare people for giving birth, you want them to feel confident and calm and like they can do it, you know, and it's really just the same thing with postpartum. We have so much in our culture that's telling mums you're not good enough, you know, you're too much like this or you're too much like that, and it's never going to work and it's too hard, and, you know, that's just undermining everything.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's so much rewiring that needs to happen inside a woman, her partner, during that pregnancy period. We're not just working with the body, we're working with her brain, right? And she has to become the master of her own thoughts. And we have to not just approach, I mean, I think it's so interesting. We send out enrolment forms to all of our families prior to coming to She Births, and it's a form of self-reflection. We don't consider ourselves to be a prescriptive course in any way. It's a self-reflective program that you take from it what you want. And so part of the questions we ask is in levels of anxiety for the mother, for the partner, around birth and around parenthood. And there's, without a doubt, over the last 11 years, the anxiety numbers have got higher and higher towards birth. But often I will see, and this has really shocked me in the last 5 years, the anxiety levels about parenthood are higher than they are for birth.
Yeah.
Which only is informing me of the negative narrative that is continuing and perpetuating around our globe through media. And the lack of support, because I love that belief that's held in lots of traditional cultures that if a woman, a new mother, experiences postnatal depletion or depression, then it's the community, the village that has failed her, not herself.
Yes. Oh, so much yes. That's exactly what I think. And yet in our culture, we have such a culture of mother blaming. I have women all the time, no matter how many blog posts I write and the stories I share, you know, and people I interview on my podcast, I will still get regular emails from women saying, I thought I was the only one. Are you sure that it's not just me? I thought I was failing. I thought I just couldn't cope, you know. And so, you know, the narrative is so strong that, you know, if you're not back in your skinny jeans and you're not running your household 3 days later and earning money and cooking and cleaning and having, you know, like sugar-free birthday parties, and, you know, it's just like there's so much unrealistic pressure that people think, wow, it's my fault that I'm not coping. And it's not at all. It's our society that's failed them.
That's right. So should we talk about that? Should we talk about like what in the ideal? Because obviously people, we don't, in Ayurveda, one of the best rules is like go for what's best and go for the optimal. But if we can't have that, then what's the next most optimal, what's the next most optimal, and so on. Because the world is always changing, nature is always changing, every day is different, and all of our families have different experiences, different amounts of family around and support around. A huge amount, I would say 50% of the people in Sydney that we teach, I'm not sure in Victoria, but 50% are experiencing what I call the immigration effect, where they have no family. I'm sure the same in Perth, right?
Yeah, definitely, yes, because we have a lot of people move here for mining jobs, so they've left their family behind.
Yeah. And you were saying you think there's going to be a big backlash from that down the line, I reckon?
I think there is. I think, you know, we've spent a long time, and it's a very masculine sort of world that we live in now. The patriarchy is still so strong. But this idea of looking outwards for answers, you know, thinking if we just get that job or move to that place or, you know, even travel to another country, then we'll find the answers we're looking for. But again, as the feminine side of things is awakening, I'm sure people are going to realise that they have the answers and they have everything they're looking for in their own heart, in their own home, in their own street, in their own village, you know, in their own family. So, you know, I am hoping that that people will become more settled, I think, over the next generation or two.
Yeah, I think it sounds great. I think it sounds amazing. And I love the idea that, yeah, as the feminine is being awoken more, because that's what She Births is all about. And that's one of the reasons why it's called She Births, much to everyone's kind of confusion. It was, I think, one of the first businesses in the world to have she in it, and everyone was so perturbed by it. But it's has to be called that, because it is about let's bring balance and let's restore the feminine power.
Yes.
That we're awakening.
You know, which is exactly why I call newborn mothers. And without a doubt, you know, every time I reach a new audience or run some ads or, you know, guest post somewhere where it's not my usual people, someone will always say, what about newborn fathers? And my answer is, what about my left knee? That's just not what I'm talking about right now. You know, if men want to take this journey on too, you know, they can teach and share and learn and reawaken their own wisdom. But specifically what I'm talking to is the feminine. And that doesn't mean to exclude people who have different gender identities or things like that, but everyone, man or woman, I think, you know, is needing more feminine balance in their lives right now. So yeah, I love that. I think we really do need to be talking about she and her and women and mothers more prominently, and start putting that at the centre of our conversations.
Yeah, and valuing that and valuing motherhood. Like, still astounds me that some partners go, oh, I'm babysitting the child. And you're not babysitting the child, you're being a parent, you know. And what about at the same time when she's at home doing housework and caring for the child? Like, she's being a mother, and that's valuable. And why doesn't the government give a little bit more money to those women who are staying at home and raising their children? I think that would be a good thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, it would have to be a good thing, wouldn't it? But it's like all women's work, whether you're a teacher or a nurse or a mum, none of it is paid or rewarded or acknowledged adequately. But I noticed, Nadine, on your website, you use the word we parent. So you have She Births and We Parent.
Yeah, that's right.
I love that.
Yeah, it's good. We're creating a parenting program. I've been doing it for years, but I've really got to knuckle down. Also writing my book, a bit far behind. You've done 2 already. I can't believe it. But yeah, we're writing a parenting program now, and it's really exciting. But it is a we parent approach, and so let's talk about it. I mean, what's happening to the woman, the baby, the partner, and let's like jump in, I suppose, to the nitty gritties and give people like top tips for, should we talk about maybe the first 24 hours after birth, because it's such a radical change time as well?
Yeah. I don't know, you know, I'd almost include that first 24 hours is almost still part of the birth, really. So you might be able to talk more to that even than I can. But I think probably, you know, the obvious things like rest and spending time with the baby, You know, but also I think something that people often forget is the food is really important, and particularly if you're in hospital, if you can line someone up to bring you something nourishing after the baby's born. You know, the meal that you eat after you give birth is often the best meal of your life, even if it's like cold Vegemite toast from the hospital, you know. But just because you are so just so ready and in need of nourishment. So if you can make that good nourishment rather than just, you know, something microwaved in whatever the kitchen had left at the hospital, I think that can make a big difference if you have that first meal be something really wholesome and nurturing, and particularly sentimental, something that feels really nostalgic and joyful for you.
I love that idea. I think that's so special. The birthing process is such an emptying on all levels. Obviously, we've emptied the womb now, and it's a cold, dark space, that vacuous space, and it's going to take time for that to come back to its original size, and that lower dantian to come back in, and the body to recontract. And the birth is a cleanse on a sort of psychic, emotional level, and on a very much physical level. She loses a lot of blood, and through the placenta lots of toxins are released from the body. So she's been emptied in so many ways, and to fill the mother up with something really nourishing and meaningful, I think, is such a great idea. But I must say, even after birth, often that first little thing, so say a woman's given birth vaginally, then I would literally bring in, like, straight from the little tea room, the midwife's tea room, you know, a sugary, milky cup of black tea and a piece of toast, or 2 pieces of toast with butter and Vegemite, you know, butter and honey, before she even stands up to have her shower. I think it's really important to get that little bit of fuel in there, and then beautiful food, like you say. And caesarean mums, I would definitely bring in more liquid foods. Certainly broths are so important, and all that kind of stuff, because it's just a little harder to go to the bathroom, and the drugs can kind of block up the bowels a little bit more. But you've got a recipe book. What do you suggest?
Well, probably the most popular first food from my recipe book is a Nepali rice pudding recipe. I think it's up on my website if people want to go and look for it. But it's it's made with basmati rice, which is lighter than the kind of sticky short grain rices, and then it's got lots of, you know, cinnamon and nutmeg and all sorts of delicious, you know, dark brown sugar and some ghee and that kind of thing. So that's probably the most popular thing. A lot of people who, you know, do my courses and things, that they'll have someone in mind that when they go into labour, they'll say, hey, can you prepare my rice pudding, you know, so that they've got someone who's going to bring it for them straight away.
I'm up in Byron Bay right now on call for a birth. I've just flown up from Sydney. My girl is in pre-labour, and so I think I better get cooking. I'm going to go recipe and the Nepali rice pudding. I think that sounds great.
Yeah, and it is exactly what you said. It's a good hit of sugar, because, you know, like, we live in such an anti-sugar world, and obviously I don't think that it's great to eat a lot of processed sugar and refined sugar. But, you know, as you mentioned, the Vedic sort of philosophy is that it is a huge cleanse after having a baby. And in really one of the strong principles in Ayurveda that I see missing in a lot of Western cleansing kind of philosophy is the idea of rejuvenation. In Ayurveda, you would never do a cleanse without then closing those loops, you know, without making sure that you don't want to leave the body open, because it's then vulnerable. So after any kind of fast, or after giving birth, or any other kind of cleanse that you do, then it's really important to strengthen and rejuvenate the body afterwards as well.
And I suppose, so when you're putting, because we do recommend our girls go completely processed sugar-free and only have, you know, our suggestion is like 1 piece of fruit a day, or 1 teaspoon of honey or maple syrup during pregnancy. But what are the benefits in Ayurveda of putting in that beautiful brown sugar or to the pudding? What do we find there?
Yeah, well, traditionally in Ayurveda, they would actually recommend you eat sweet foods only for 3 days.
Amazing. Yippee.
I know, which lots of people are excited about. But of course, it's not using white sugar. In India, they use, jaggery, which is the...
Oh my God, I love jaggery.
Oh, it's so amazing, isn't it? And you can taste the minerals. I mean, it's rich and it's got a really full flavour. It's completely different. And it doesn't... white sugar is, in Ayurveda, is considered rajasic because which means it's like exciting and it's too stimulating. But then when you separate the treacle is tamasic, which is dull and heavy. But actually, when you keep the sugar together in its original form, it's sattvic, which is peaceful and calm. So again, it's only through that process of processing it that you stuff up the kind of original quality and intention of the food. And I think, the other thing in Ayurveda is that sweet food, it represents love. All foods have emotions attached to them. And sweet doesn't have to mean sugar. It can mean complex carbohydrates and fruits and, as you mentioned, things like maple syrup and all sorts of good natural whole foods. But we often do crave those foods because we really need that love and that nurturing and that grounding kind of stuff. So, so we definitely don't really restrict those good kinds of sweet foods, in postpartum. In India, probably they even go to a little bit extreme because some of their postpartum foods are really quite sickly, and particularly these days because they often have transitioned to white sugar, which means it doesn't have that grounding and the minerals and things that natural sugars do.
Yeah, I love it. I think, we recommend when girls are craving sugar during their pregnancy to go for the sweet potato and basmati rice. There's a sweetness to it as
perfect.
And miso soups and all those sorts of things as well. They're so good. Fill yourself with sweetness is absolutely still good.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how people should think about sweetness too. It doesn't mean that you're having like cakes and biscuits every day. It means that you're having, like good quality whole foods. Sweet potato and basmati rice are just perfect.
Delicious.
Yeah.
So for the first 3 days, I suppose a lot of our mums as well, after 4 hours, would go home. Straight from hospital once, everything's been checked, and mum and baby as well, and then get into bed, right, and have their sweet foods for 3 days. And 40 days inside the house, there's going to be a huge amount going on for a lot of people just even thinking about that. Totally petrified of cabin fever, particularly if you live in a tiny apartment in Bondi, like me. What's the whole theory behind 40 days of confinement?
Yeah, we have so much resistance to it in our culture, and I think it's because we do just go. And obviously people who are extroverted, what increases oxytocin is positive social connections. So for some introverts, that's going to include a lot more privacy. And for some extroverts, that's going to include a lot more, cups of tea with friends. But best of all, if you can have people visit you at home who you're comfortable with in your pajamas, and you don't mind if they see you with your boobs out, and you might have an adult nappy on and that kind of thing. So you want to make sure that if you are the kind of person who would get lonely, that the kinds of people that you're inviting over into that very sacred private space are the kinds of people who are going to just love and adore you, in all of those moments of there's lots of fun stuff, isn't there, that happens in those first few days.
Totally. Absolutely. So what should mums be transitioning towards after their 3 days of sweet food?
Mushy foods. So like you were mentioning, stocks and broths and soups, and khichdi obviously is one of the most important Ayurvedic foods, which is just rice and lentils cooked together.
Great recipe for khichdi in our She Births course as well.
Yeah, perfect. So that would be another really traditional first food too. So if people don't have so much of a sweet tooth, that's a really great thing to have. But we kind of say it's a bit like when you wean a baby, that you start with mushy foods, then you move towards more solid foods, and you start with things that are easy to digest, and then you move towards things that are more exciting or adventurous or unfamiliar to you. You kind of save them for later.
Sounds good. And, you know, bone broths weren't around in India, and certainly not in the south of India where the majority of people are vegetarian. What do you think as an Ayurvedic practitioner about the bone broths? And
well, you know, it's interesting you say that. In Ayurveda, meat is considered a medicine. So although they're all vegetarian and it's not part of their daily diet, if someone was really needing strengthening or was iron deficient or needed to build up their blood, then bone broth might have been used in a medicinal way. And also, now that I've done so much more research about other countries, so many countries around the world have bone broth as one of their primary postpartum foods. So, you know, if it feels right for people, I think that's a strong, you know, that's a very common traditional postpartum food to have bone broths. But at the same time, if you don't like it or if you're vegetarian, there's no essential food. So, you know, you have to choose what's going to bring you peace and joy, as always.
Yeah, that's right. I often find that vegans, there's nothing like early motherhood to move you back onto meat. So it's interesting that you see a lot of vegans transfer to eating meat through broth postpartum, just because they're instinctively, intuitively calling for that medicine, for needing more strength, not just if they're anemic, but just I think they get that inner strength, that bone strength. You know?
Yeah, that's right. And some people, I'm vegetarian and I never did eat meat, but I definitely had a lot of ghee. And if if you're feeling really conflicted about it, you can try and find some local, you know, grass-fed, free-range cows, you know, see if you can just get something really good quality, you know, and maybe just feel about it as though, you know, if you feel like you really need it, that it is just a medicine. And, you know, I don't think anyone should feel guilty if they feel like that's right for their body at that time. Yeah.
And do you have an attitude towards dairy?
Well, dairy is well loved in Ayurveda because they don't have meat, they don't even have eggs, so it's the only source of B12. You know, so from that perspective, milk, and because cows are sacred, then milk is very revered food in Ayurveda, especially ghee. So again, in our modern world, it gets complicated because of, you know, all the factory farming techniques and, you know, the environmental impact of land use from cows and that kind of thing. So everyone kind of has to make their own call on what's right for them. But from a nutritional perspective, ghee is considered one of the most important foods you can eat in postpartum in India.
And it does so much, not just for like your digestive fire and, but for your brain.
Yeah, exactly. It's so grounding. It's really nourishing. It lubricates your body. Yeah, and I think a lot of people find that, again, if they can source some good quality ghee that they feel ethically okay with, then the benefits just are so great. They'll just eat it and just feel like, oh, that's exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah, no, it's such a powerful one. Okay, it's so easy to go down the food.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to backtrack a bit because you never told us your top tip for the first 24 hours.
First 24 hours. Baby gaze, fall in love.
Yes.
And ice packs for your fanny. Yeah. So if you do leave home, if you do leave the hospital, at that 4-hour mark, make sure that you are set up at home for rest. Often you'll be coming home, I suppose, to a chaotic house if you've left it mid-labour, which a lot of people have. And just to be able to practice letting all of that go and prioritise falling in love and having space to meet your baby and continue the very important profession of baby gazing. So often babies will have a nice big feed after birth, and then after that first feed, then partner can have first cuddle while mum showers, and then we get mum ready to go home. Or if she's comfortable and wants to stay in the hospital and she feels safer there and more supported there, being able to ring a buzzer every time she's breastfeeding, then do that as well. And let your baby feed as much as you want, they want, and have lots of skin on skin time. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's so much in that first 24 hours, isn't there, that we could talk about. So it's hard to choose one.
Yeah, it's such a radical transformation and shift in the body-mind. I suppose the best way to think about it, it sounds weird, but, you know, when we injure ourselves, when we hurt some part of our body, it's so critical that we rest immediately in order to get the quickest healing and recovery time. So bringing as much sort of emphasis to that immediacy after birth, that first day after birth gives you a better week, that first week gives you a better month, and then that first 40 days gives you the best 40 years. So everything leads, it's one continuum, and resting straight after birth is very important. Yeah, and we bind for some women, just a gentle bind if that feels nice for them to walk around. But often, like, our belly belts might not fit mum straight after birth, and it might feel like too much pressure, too sensitive. But she might want to wear it for an hour or something. If she can have a massage, even for half an hour, like day 1, day 2 after birth, to settle vata, then I think that's an amazing practice as well to implement.
What about your 4-day tip as we're kind of moving into that?
Yeah, the 4 days.
The first 4 days?
Yeah, well, you've talked about those little dietary changes, and then I think, you know, day 3, roughly, or a bit earlier sometimes, or a bit later, our milk starts to flow, and we need to have the essential cabbage with all the beautiful anti-inflammatory properties in the fridge. And I think it's always so interesting when milk comes in. For some women, their boobs get ginormous and hot and engorged and sore. And for other women, it doesn't happen like that. And it's actually no correlation to how much milk you're producing as well. So I think it's good to have the cabbage. If it doesn't feel right for you, you might not even need it.
Yes. I'll add to that, it happens at the other end too. Once people's milk supply regulates at about 6 to 8 weeks, I have a lot of my clients saying, I think I've lost my milk. And it's not true. Actually, what's happened is your body started to regulate its supply better, so you don't get it engorged and leak as often. So it doesn't mean the milk's not there. It just means that it's gotten better at preparing, you know, at the right time for your baby. So, you know, a lot of people I see moving into formula and thinking they need to do top-ups and things, but it's very, very normal. You know, how much you're leaking and how engorged you are is not necessarily related to your milk supply.
Yeah. And then, I mean, when milk comes in, it's such a big shift again in hormones, and women go through that dramatic increase in prolactin and dramatic reduction in progesterone and estrogen. So that reduction in progesterone and estrogen is a mirror. If you want to try and understand it, it's a mirror to PMT. It's what happens before you start bleeding with your monthly cycle. And so think of it like PMT times 100 and prepare for it like that. It might not be that strong, but it can be. And so you'll feel incredibly sensitive and vulnerable, teary. Prolactin is the teary hormone. And it's a time when we really want to fall into that nurturing energy of prolactin and prioritize our baby and not have to think about visitors. So I think it's a time for privacy, calling in reassurance, and the doula is critical. The postpartum doula is really critical on that day when milk comes in, or those couple of days. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's often the first visit I'll have with a client is in that first few days. Sometimes if they've had a really difficult birth, I might go and see them in hospital. But in general, it'll be, you know, a few days later, once they're home and everything's starting to just feel like, oh, wow, that just happened, you know. Yeah. And all the emotions are coming up and the milk's coming in, and yeah, it can be really big. And I think leaning into that is such a good point that you make, you know, because we do tend to see being emotional as a negative thing. It's not a negative thing. It's a perfect skill for a mother to be emotional, you know. So I think actually leaning into and embracing that change is part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, I talk a lot with my couples about boundaries create better births, and boundaries are going to create better parenting experiences too for you. And it isn't about having an open door policy, like, at all. And in this postpartum period, like you've already said, but boundaries around particular things, and trying to get a visual while you're pregnant of like what it might be like postpartum, and imagine and dream what the ideal kind of postpartum experience would be, I think is an interesting one to contemplate.
Yeah, I love that idea, because the other thing that happens when you imagine is your body starts to produce those hormones. So even if you're finding it's not going to plan, but if you can start to visualize how you want to be feeling and how you want things to look, you know, it can actually start to move you into that space emotionally, even if other stuff is going on in your environment that's not ideal.
And we know that women who spend more time thinking about being a mum actually are more likely to have better birth experiences as well. They're focusing on that end result, but possibly they're also producing those beautiful hormones internally. That are out. Yeah. So, you know, oxytocin is such a powerful hormone, and for some women, you know, it's peaked at crowning, and then it's in that hour after birth that it's existing at these really, really high levels, to the point where it's sometimes like psychedelic to see the world, the awakening that's happened. But those oxytocin levels stay high for a really long time, and I think they create a new barometer in us as women.
I totally agree. And they do stick around because of the brain plasticity, you know, because a mother's brain is wired for learning and change and, you know, new experiences. Then those oxytocin pathways get bedded down in a totally new way.
Talk more about that. I think that's so interesting. What is going on in a woman's brain then?
Oh, it's just fascinating.
Sum it up in 3 minutes.
Let's see. You'll have to read the book for the, the long version. But you know, so it's a combination of both the oxytocin and the plasticity. And most people understand that. So teenagers, for example, have highly plastic brains. It's why they feel emotionally a bit all over the place, and they're on a bit of a roller coaster. It's why they're tired. You know, it's why they're sometimes a bit unpredictable or irrational or forgetful and all of those kind of things. The same thing's happening when we become mothers, but most mothers don't realise that that's what is happening to them. So they can start to feel like they're really stupid, or there's something wrong with them, or people can start to sort of judge them for, you know, behaviour that may be a little bit out of character, or, you know, just odd. And actually what's happening is a very, very important, you know, evolutionary biological tactic, which is preparing us for the next stage of our lives. And I often liken it a little bit to upgrading the operating system of your brain. Everyone knows when they have to upgrade the operating system on their phone or their computer. At first, it's really annoying because you can't find anything and you can't remember how it works, and the button that used to do this now does that, and the shortcuts have changed and that kind of thing. But once you get used to it, you go, oh yeah, this operating system is actually better than the old one. And that's what's going on in your brain. You are preparing for a new life. You're going to need completely different skills as a mother than you did, you know, in your career, or, you know, in other roles that you've previously had in your life. So your brain is just rewiring. It's in this stage of being highly plastic, being very open to learning new things. And at the same time, that can be overwhelming. But when you realize what a precious gift that is, you know, then it can completely change your perspective and make mothers feel much more kind towards themselves.
Yeah, and understand that what they're doing is actually, what they're yielding to is incredibly beneficial, and it's of value. Or I suppose it's so aligned with what we say in she births about giving preference and allowing yourself to slow down and finish work as early as possible is a really important thing, to allow the endorphins to cloud the frontal lobe, the neocortex, during pregnancy. So all those times that you forget the keys, or you can't remember what you were doing, or, you know, you've forgotten how long the lamb should be roasted for, or whatever it is, all of that is your endorphins starting to build more and more in the lead up to birth. But it's part of a continuum that's taking you forward into parenting as well. And that slowing down is also when you start to go into hopefully some boredom.
Yes, and you kind of have to go through that boredom, don't you, to find the new pace, the new gear.
That's right, the new gear, the new identity as well. But boredom is similar to ironing, to scrubbing floors, to going for a walk. And when you're in your body and you're doing something repetitive, like going for a walk, one foot in front of the other, a rhythm with your breath, and maybe you're listening to a podcast, maybe for some time it's probably good if you just don't, because the brain goes into a naturally self-reflective and autobiographical mode, and it starts to simply, if you just watch it, it will start to reassess you and your life and where you're at in your journey, and it will literally start to come up with the answers and the steps that you require for the next step going forward. And this is all happening in pregnancy. The innate wisdom and those innate hormones are guiding us forward into the next phase of motherhood if we just give them the space to, and let that parasympathetic nervous system take over, the endorphins and the oxytocin. It sounds so perfect how it just leads into this neuroplastic, new learning operating system it's described as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, it's just two ways of describing the same thing. And I think for some people, one description will hit home better, and for other people, you know, another one will help them to understand better. So it's really useful, isn't it, to have those different ways of explaining what's going on. Do you have one more top tip for the first 40 days?
Well, boundaries is a big one.
Yeah, boundaries is super important, isn't it?
Nourishing food, your recipe book is gold. What else? I think listening to yourself, and if you are going crazy inside the house, like go out and put your feet in the earth. I would, and you know, if you really feel a craving to go down to the sushi train, then, you know, do that as well if you really, really want to. I would say stay off blue light as well. I would say you're setting your child up their first circadian rhythms as well. And women are definitely, we all are, definitely too exposed to blue light via technology. And although your sleep patterns aren't what they used to be, there will be interrupted nighttime sleep. I would encourage you to maybe put red light globes in the bathroom. I know there's some families up here in Byron that have been talking to me about that, so that we're not getting that blue light. Interrupt our melatonin, which is closely connected to our oxytocin as well. So stay off the apps and stay off Facebook chats, you know, after the sun goes down. I think that's a great idea. And I think if people find they are getting lonely and they're needing to connect to people online, it's probably a really good prompt to connect with people in real life instead. You know, that really what they're craving is actual friendships. It's the actual village. That's right. Yeah, and that's what, at She Births, we create soul mama circles. And I think that's a really important way, as well as virtual and face-to-face, coming to and not just talking about, you know, sleep and poo. We're talking about our identity as women and how that's shifting, our sexuality, our relationships. All of this is now in a process of change.
Yeah, I love that. And I think my top tip for the first 40 days would be really along those lines of reaching out and asking for help and being vulnerable, you know, and letting people into your life. It's okay if you haven't cleaned the house, and it's okay if you're still wearing your PJs at midday. I hope you're wearing them at midnight.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is to let people into that space, people who you love and you trust. Find those people who can be there in that moment with you, because those people will be friends for life. Because the other thing people don't often realise is that if your oxytocin is high, it's not just to bond you with your baby, but it'll bond you with everyone else too. So you're open to forging all sorts of new, strong relationships in that stage of your life as well.
Totally, absolutely. I love it. I think one distinction we need to talk about is, the type of doula I am, the birth doula, and the type of doula you are. And a lot of people might employ me and other doulas on our secret she birth list, thinking that that's enough for them postpartum. We give generally a birthing doula will give 2 postnatal visits, but in that time, say 2-hour visits, it's great, it's in your home, but a lot of that can be used to just talk about the birth, and a lot of that can be used to just help with breastfeeding a little bit and do things around the house. And but it's generally not enough for the majority of people, right?
No, and I would say most of my clients, I think most have both a birth doula and a postpartum doula. So it's a lot of people in the industry have too. Like, I know a lot of my students, they're new as a postpartum doula, they'll say, oh, but she's already got a birth doula and she's already got a home birth midwife and she's already got a cleaner. She's not going to hire me. And I'm like, no, that's exactly the kind of person who's going to hire you. So I agree. I think they're very different skills. We bring very different things. And I would never presume to, think that I'm going to help with their birth. I mean, that's just not what my skill is. And I do have some birth doulas who I work very closely with. We often will refer, our clients to each other, knowing that they've got that good team.
Yeah, the same philosophy, the same approach. But tell me more, like, what do you actually do? Like, how many visits? Because birth doula, it's normally 2 before the birth, on call for a 4-week period, 38 to 42, and then attending the birth as long as that couple needs, and then 2 postnatal. So what happens with the postpartum doula?
Yeah, look, it's so different. And
Really?
Everyone's really different because everyone brings their own sort of skills. So some people do massage, some people cook, some people, are herbalists or naturopaths or nutritionists or acupuncturists or, so a lot of the time they'll have these other elements that they can bring. And then there's also the different ways that people work. So although the in-home care is kind of what people traditionally think of as postpartum care, and it's probably the primary role of a doula, but also most of us, I think, would have other things that we do too, like maybe a meal delivery service, or we run mums groups, so I think it's much more varied really than being a birth doula. And I think, I think it means that people can find the right person for them.
What would be the ultimate, do you think? Like, if you were providing the ultimate package for somebody? Well,
the way they do it in traditional cultures, which doesn't really work here, but is they would have a, like in lots of parts of Asia, in China they call it a confinement lady. Yeah. They would have someone who would move in for the first 40 days and basically just run the house, just quietly do the laundry, do the cooking, do the cleaning, but also have this really amazing knowledge of breastfeeding and, massage and herbs and nutritious food and that kind of thing. So, a lot of the time there are people in Australia who often from Chinese backgrounds who will bring, or Indian backgrounds, who will bring someone over for that first 40 days and have that, 100% total live-in care, which means you can literally lie in bed all day if you want to.
Yeah,
and the only time
couples do that. We've had some.
Yeah. And then the only time you leave the house is if you want to, because like you were saying, if someone really wants to go to the sushi train, that's great. But what you really want to avoid is like, oh, we've run out of food and I have to go to Coles, but I'm exhausted and my milk's leaking and, you know, I don't know how to use the car seat yet. And those are the kinds of things we want to be avoiding when we're talking about going out. You know, so that would be great. But then for a lot of people now in our culture, we value our privacy too much. We might not want someone living with us. And also there's that care's not available. I mean, most of us couldn't afford it and very few people are even offering that kind of service anymore.
It's funny, like I think I know 4 families that have brought people over from Asia to live in, and 2 of the 4 sent the person home earlier. They found it too intense to have them in their home, and it was just too intense to have it.
And I think it can be quite old-fashioned and a little bit infantilizing to women. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes that traditional cultural care, they're very much like, you can't eat this food because it's too windy, and you can't go outside, and you can't wash your hair. And, you know, there's so many rules and things that for kind of young modern women, it can just feel too controlling and oppressive, you know, for the way that we value privacy and independence now. So, yeah, it's not always a good fit, and not everyone's like that, but there's definitely you know, that can definitely be a risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I thought in Ayurveda, like, I think it's like a daily massage would be like amazing.
Yeah.
Couple of weeks, would you say, or a couple of massages a week?
Yeah, I've even read some people have 2 massages a day in those early weeks. Yeah, and definitely daily. You know, and again, for most people in our culture, it's probably not something that they can either afford or that is even available to them. But even if I think aiming for like a weekly visit for the first 6 or 12 weeks is great. But the other thing to keep in mind that most people forget is 6 weeks is really just the beginning. And most really good postpartum doulas will offer some kind of follow-up care. Maybe the in-home care might, you know, taper off around then, you know, 6 or 12 weeks. But a lot of people will run either online programs, forums, mums groups, phone support, you know, a physical weekly or monthly mums group, something like that, that means that they can stay connected and still, because the transition is huge. I mean, once you get through that first 6 weeks, often babies will wake up, you know, at about 4 months they'll have a sleep regression, and then at 6 months they start feeding, and then the mum might be thinking of returning to work, and, you know, there's just so much stuff going on. Yeah, so I think really aiming for longer term support is probably really important.
That's great. One family we had were really struggling, or the mum in particular, felt like she was actually on the verge of going mad after her baby was born with the interrupted sleep. Very quickly, very soon into the journey, I think she was about 3 weeks. And, you know, this is where it comes back to our sort of philosophy is nobody gets off scot-free in the perinatal journey. Like, everyone has a moment of big challenge that we're going to have to call in support for and learn new skills for and go through a massive shift, a rite of passage at some point. Now, she'd had a great pregnancy, a great birth, but I think 2 to 3 weeks into postpartum, even when her baby was sleeping, she couldn't sleep. She was so aggravated. And the best remedy ended up being for her to literally walk down from South Bondi to the Icebergs, which is our swimming pool. It's got a little massage centre. And for, I think it was 2 weeks, every second day, she just had a 30-minute massage. I think she started the first week 30 minutes every day, and then went to every 2 days. And then after that, it was like it just allowed her nervous system to adjust to the changes. She needed to settle. She needed her nervous system to recalibrate and rewire.
Yeah. Which is the other huge value of a postpartum doula that people don't really often understand, but is that she already knows all of those people in your community. So if you ring up saying I'm having trouble sleeping, or I'm having trouble with breastfeeding, or the baby's not sleeping, or, you know, anything, I'm constipated or whatever, that doula will be like, don't worry, I know exactly the person who you need to go and see, you know.
Yeah.
So having that network opened up to you without you having to find who you can trust and if they're any good, and, you know, asking 1,000 people and spending all that time on Google, it's just so reassuring to know that you've got someone there who you can say, help, what do I do about this?
Yeah, and do it immediately. I think, you know, the number one rule with breastfeeding that I have is, like, the moment there's an issue, get the help. Like, you don't not to sort of interfere with your own intuition in solving a little glitch in the process, but if you've got a bigger issue that's coming up and you haven't found a way through, like, immediately get the help. And I think that's what you want. We can start to be so tired in that postpartum period or a little bit overwhelmed that you get lost in the process and you don't call out for help. You kind of lose your centre with the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that asking for help is really absolutely the most critical thing. And we're just not taught to do that. Again, in our masculine society, we're taught to do everything alone. You know, and often we can be too proud to admit that we're struggling, or, you know, to make us look vulnerable or admit, you know, what we're going through and that kind of thing. And it's kind of understandable because we do have this history of mother blaming and even, you know, having mothers' children taken away from them, or institutionalizing mothers, or giving them drugs. You know, we've done so many things over the past sort of 100 or so years to really try and control and numb women to their true identity and their true power. No wonder it's a little bit scary for women to come out and admit that they're emotional and that they want connection and that they need help. You know, it can be a very scary thing.
Yeah, and which ties again with birth. Birth is such a great, or preparing and then going through birth is such an important training ground for the postpartum, because in order to take care of your baby during labour, you have to allow yourself to be taken care of as well, loved and cared. And if a woman doesn't look like a goddess throughout labour, she ain't being cared for enough. And that's what we need to allow, and be receiving, be open, and be... Partners learn how to care for mums. And
yes, I love that.
Talk forever.
I know, and I was thinking that's actually a really good point to end on, because I think that's really just one of the most important things, isn't it? But do you have anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Look, I would love to talk to you, but let's do it again around all the postnatal practices that exist around the world.
Yeah, I agree. Let's do more.
Do another one. Let's do another one. What about you? Have you got any other final points? Anything?
Oh, no. I mean, we've covered a lot, haven't we? But there's still so much that we could talk about. But let's leave it for another time. Yeah. Maybe the last thing is, where can people find you? We can pop all the links up in the show notes.
Yeah. So I'm at shebirths.com. And what's your URL?
Newbornmothers.com.
Easy.
So, yeah, easy. So you've got online childbirth education as well as face-to-face live classes on the east coast of Australia?
That's right. And I'll just launched in Byron, so we're launching in new areas by invitation, so people are welcome to invite me over to Perth or wherever. And what about you? What have you got to offer people at the moment?
Yeah, well, my primary work is training now. I train postpartum doulas and other postpartum professionals in Newborn Mothers Collective, if people are interested in that. And if they're not wanting to be a professional, if they're just a mum, that's a terrible thing to say. Yes. They are a mum.
Yeah.
And interested in learning more about the changes that are going on in their brain and how to build their village and boundaries and all of this stuff that we've talked about. Then I do have a freebie on my website. We can share the link too in the show notes, but it's the guide to building a 21st century village.
I love it. Sounds fantastic. Good. We'll put all those notes together, and thanks for being here, Julia. I'm glad we got
I know. It's been a long time, hasn't it? We've been planning this, so I'm glad we finally pulled it off, and we will have to do it again. And we look forward to your book coming out too. Have you got a date or anything?
You know what? I'm writing it in 40 days. If I write 1,200 words per day, I will have finished a 50,000-page book in 40 days. So
that's an awesome goal.
Isn't it? I was like, yay, 40, here we go. So yeah, nearly another couple of months, and I'm sure it'll be out soon. I'm very excited.
Awesome.
All right, darling. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Good, and we'll chat again soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed the show. Remember to subscribe so that you don't miss out on our next conversation. Share with a friend and leave us a review.